Hello, everyone. Happy afternoon. And thank you for joining us here at the JourneyWoman webinar on Mexico and on the Caribbean. My name is Nancy Drolet, and I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm on the Advisory Council for JourneyWoman, and my area of expertise is the Caribbean. If you are on the JourneyWoman list, you already know that we promote everything women. We have a directory that features women-owned and women-operated businesses, and we feature webinars on different areas of the world. And so I really appreciate that JourneyWoman has wended their way to the Caribbean region. I'm going to ask everybody, except the speakers, to mute. Great. I also wanted to let everyone know that at the end of this month, there will be a 30th anniversary webinar for JourneyWoman. And I know that Carolyn will probably pop something in the chat towards the end of this webinar so that if you can join us, that would be absolutely amazing. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to have our speakers introduce themselves. I have worked in the Caribbean region with tour operators and hotel chains and cruise lines, and with the Caribbean Tourism Organization. But I'm the founder of One Caribbean Canada, which is a company that really works to promote the region as a whole through a website, onecaribbeancanada.ca. Where we don't actually try to sell you anything. It's not a booking site. It's really a site for information and where we can link people to countries and to hotels, etc., where you can learn more about the destinations. So we're all working together, and that helps us promote a lot of countries that may be overlooked. Countries that maybe don't accept big cruise ships or don't have runways long enough to handle big planes. And so they're off the beaten track and so often overlooked. For example, we just added Montserrat and St. Eustatius to our website, so two lesser known islands in the Caribbean, but well worth a visit. So in terms of this talk, that gives you a little bit of knowledge about me, but we try to keep these talks informal but informative. And what we're going to do is try to ask any questions that, answer any questions that you might have as we go along. So I'm going to introduce our three speakers, or rather, let me say, let's have each of them introduce themselves, and then we can get to know one another and what everyone does. So, Chris, why don't we start with you? Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody on the call?
Hi, I'm Chris Rudolph. I have been living in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico for the past 34 years. Came here very young, started a cafe, went into a big restaurant, started with a cooking school in 1997, and then right after that started doing tours in Mexico, Guatemala, Cuba, a lot of Latin America, work a lot now in Europe. So my company is about food and wine tourism, but because I live in Mexico, we focus a lot on that region as well. So originally from Houston, Texas, but I've been an expat most of my life.
And do you like your spices hot?
Not too hot, honestly.
So early on in my tourism career, I was a destination rep in Cuba. And I have to tell you, when I came back to Canada, everything tasted so bland in comparison. Everything was so flavorful in Mexico. It's amazing what you get used to. Well, welcome and thanks for introducing yourself. Krista, why don't you take the reins now and introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from, of course, and what it is you do.
Hi, my name's Krista. I am originally from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area. And shortly after university, I moved to Colorado, which I lived there for almost 20 years. And I was in the corporate world and decided I had been working from home full time for 3 years. And I asked if I could kind of do that from anywhere. I always wanted to be an expat. They said yes. And I kind of searched for my country and I narrowed it down to Panama. And I Googled where to dive in Panama. I'm an avid scuba diver, and that took me to the islands called Bocas del Toro. And I thought, well, I'll just do it for a year, and that was 7 years ago. But when I got here, I met someone who was starting a coral restoration project. So that's rebuilding coral reefs. And I learned everything that I could about that working with him for 3 years. And then I ended up opening my own nonprofit called Mother of Corals, where we teach the communities about what we do.
That's amazing. So we get to talk about food and conservation today. We do have a third person that will join us, but we understand she's been delayed, and this is someone who tours around different areas of Cuba. So when she joins us, we'll swap over to her and learn about her. But maybe Kristen, you can start and tell us a little bit more about some of the food tours that you organize in Mexico.
Well, I started in 1997 when Mexican food, or let's say more sophisticated Mexican food, was kind of hitting the US market. We work a lot with local producers, showcasing people that, do homemade tortillas, and ladies in the villages doing, food that they've been doing a very long time. I spread my business into the area of Michoacan, Mexico, about 5, 6 years ago. And there we work with a group of cooks called the Traditional Cooks of Mexico, and they do pre-Hispanic food. So they've been cooking the food of their ancestors for thousands of years, the same recipes, same cooking equipment. And so I take groups down there to learn. So it's about cooking, but it's also really about culture and history, to really understand the culture of these people and their food and where it comes from. Mexico has a lot of indigenous ingredients. It's one of the 6 countries in the world that has a vast amount of indigenous ingredients. Therefore, our food is different. It's different from most of the world because of that.
Give an example. What do you mean by an indigenous food?
Even an indigenous food is, for example, tamale. An indigenous food is a tortilla, it's beans, it's cactus, it's squash. Squash all comes from Mexico, tomatoes, chocolate's indigenous. But it's the method of cooking and roasting. They use fire a lot in their cooking. Grindstones, we have 2 grindstones, the metate and the molcajete, that's used in all traditional dishes, basically. So again, it's a very unique way of cooking, but also showcases a very interesting pre-Hispanic history. Then we also have the more sophisticated, newer Mexican kitchen, which has gotten a lot of press, let's say the last 8 or 10 years. Wines in Mexico are now really coming out at the forefront. I guess in about 10 years, we're going to be a very big wine country. It's sort of a new industry. The last 10 or 15 years, it's hit central Mexico. It's always been in Baja California, but it's spreading to other areas of Mexico. And so wine in Mexico is a brand new thing. There's always been tequila and mezcal. So there's a lot of beverages in the component to the cooking that we do.
And it's not just Corona, is it?
It's not.
By the way, I should tell those that are watching us that if you have any questions at all, please pop them in the chat. And then I'll be checking the chat. And if there's a question that I can ask one of our speakers, I'd be happy to do so. Krista, why don't we swap over to you for a second and tell us a little bit more about the conservation efforts with coral. I should point out to you that I had an opportunity to tour Coral Vida. I don't know if you've heard of Coral Vida. They're in Grand Bahama Island in the Bahamas, and they were the recipient of an award. It was the Earth Shot Award. That's what it was. And the Prince and the Princess of Wales, that I think they were down a few years ago, awarded this for all their efforts on rebuilding coral. So I'm fascinated to know what it is that you are doing in terms of coral restoration in Panama. Oh, you're muted. That never gets old, right?
Yeah. Well, I want to step back just a hair, because I still do meet people who say, what's happening with coral reefs? What do you mean? What do you mean they're dying? Is there something going on? And so, you know, even though I think it is more in the news than it has been ever, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about the fact that due to climate change and many factors that I always roll up to call it human impact, coral reefs are dying. We've lost about 80% of the reefs in the Caribbean in the last 40 years. So there are a lot of different organizations that are working to do a human intervention to help this problem. And in different ways. And when I joined the one that I did, I loved everything I learned, but what I noticed was there wasn't a focus as much on how do we teach non-scientists about what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And, you know, I call it the normal people because I'm not a scientist, the rest of the world to have empathy for this problem and to be involved and to be part of the solution. So I opened Mother of Corals with a focus on education. And so I offer tours to come work with me, and I offer it to snorkelers, to scuba divers, to individuals, and to groups. And so I've got 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 7 day, you know, how it depends on how detailed you want to get for the time you spend with me. And that all funds me teaching the local community, the indigenous community here about saving their reefs and how to improve their practices around the reefs and also live in a more sustainable way to help this resource that, you know, 95% of the income in the islands is from tourism. And so if that resource goes away, you know, everyone's going to be hurting.
Yeah, it's a really big problem because of the reefs dying. I mean, I think that a lot of the knowledge of the regular Joe out there, if you will, only comes from buying sunscreen that says reef safe. And maybe that's their first idea that there could be a problem with reefs. Can you explain why that's so important, by the way? Like I don't know that some folks even understand why it's so critical, you know, what you're wearing when you're going into the water and how it can impact the reefs.
Yeah, so it was determined, you know, I want to say it's been about 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, that there are a couple of ingredients. The biggest one is called oxybenzone that are in the typical sunscreens, or I should say past tense, because a lot have really switched over since this finding.
Yeah.
That were shown in a lab shown to degrade and bleach coral. It's an important practice, and I love to be able to tell people when they say, you know, what can I do to help? Is it the biggest thing? Absolutely not. Is, you know, changing your sunscreen going to save coral reefs? Probably not, but it is something that everyone can do. And I mean everywhere, right? Because even if you live in Colorado or Minnesota or Canada, the runoff ends up in the ocean. And these ingredients that they found in sunscreen actually are not filtered out in water filtration systems. So, you know, they make it into the ocean through runoff.
So it's the start, right?
Start, yeah, exactly. It's a start. Yes,
Start.
absolutely.
Good. So one of the things that actually before I get to my next question, Kristen, we have a question about what types of varietals are grown in Mexico. We were just talking about foods that are indigenous and ingredients that are indigenous. So what varietals are actually growing in Mexico?
Well, these days it's the most common varietals you also find in America. We have the white red and the red wines. We have the Cabernets, the Merlots, Malbecs. They're growing as well. They started doing a little orange wine recently. Chardonnays, the Pinots. Nothing too exotic. We don't have any indigenous grapes.
Okay.
The grapes that we had historically came with the Spanish in the 1500s. And there's a very interesting story. Actually, the grapes thrived in Mexico. It's actually a perfect climate for wine, to grow grapes. And it did so well that the Spanish actually made it illegal for Mexicans to have wineries.
Oh,
So they didn't want competition in their international market at the time. And because we're land where we grow year round many things, our industry was thriving early on. Mexico actually has the oldest winery of all the Americas, from California all the way to Argentina. And it's because it's one of the original ones. If you buy a bottle, the cork will say 1596. And it's called Casa Madero, and it's up in northern Mexico. And they closed down all the other wineries in Mexico because they didn't want the competition, but they left one open, which was this specific winery from 1596, because they needed wine for the church, for the sacrament. So they had to have some wine. And so it's a very interesting story because we did always have wine in Mexico until we weren't allowed to have it. And so then, when we got our independence from Spain in 1820, we could, have wine again, but it just wasn't part of the palate. It wasn't something that people knew much about. At that time, we were tequila, mezcal country. Then we became a beer country. We've been a beer country since the mid 1800s. With the same, German immigrants that went to America. Some of them also went to Mexico and started our beer industry early on. So we were never thought of really as a wine country until recently, but it's not really a new story. It's a very old story that's just happening again.
You're muted, Nancy.
There I am.
There you are.
I have to say that for me, when it comes to the Caribbean, not that we don't talk wine, but we talk rum.
Yeah.
Because rum, of course, with the sugarcane, etc., is something that there are, of course, a few islands that do it extremely well, and of course we have rum competition. Same thing, with the tequila and mezcal that Mexico has, right? All the different grades. So now it's a whole new avenue to explore with wines, right? I just got a question, and this one was for you, Kristen, and actually it leads right into the question that I was going to ask you both. So we'll start with Kristen. This lady is asking about her small airport has regular flights into Cancun, and so she's interested and looking to travel to the Quintana Roo, the region, and the province, and make use of the new train line. Can you suggest smaller towns and villages on the train route with good walkability, food, beaches, and good hiking? She's also curious about Oaxaca and food tours there. So let's start with smaller towns and villages. Any place that you would recommend someone get off the train and wander about.
Well, I must say that I live on the actual opposite end of the country. So if I were to drive to that area, it would take 2 to 3 days. So it's not an area I'm very familiar with. The train they just opened is brand new. It was a very controversial train because for ecological reason, they tried to stop it for a long time, but they have built it. It's going through some jungle areas. So for places I'm just not familiar with. Obviously we have a lot of beach resorts in that area, but we also have some beautiful cities like Merida and some very important Mayan ruins that aren't necessarily in the beach. They're more cities.
And actually, I could interject. I used to do the bus route from Cancun to Merida. You would pass a town on the way to Chichen Itza called Valladolid, and Valladolid was a very colonial town, and that was a great town to go out and walk around, as well as Merida that you're mentioning, which is the capital of the Yucatan. But beaches, I think you're pretty much left with the coast, which is Playa del Carmen, all the way from Tulum up to Cancun and now beyond that. But maybe you can talk a little bit about Oaxaca. Do you do food tours in Oaxaca?
I used to do food tours in Oaxaca. It's known in Mexico as one of the best places to eat. Southern Mexico, it's a very big state. So you have the city, or you have the beaches as well. Again, it's a very large state. Oaxaca City is where most people go. They're known for their moles and their chilies. They have a lot of a larger indigenous community in that part of Mexico. So, you know, very different from the beach resorts. It's a very different feel. They do have a lot of cooking classes in Oaxaca City. A friend of mine, Susanna Trilling, owns a cooking school there, which is quite popular, called Seasons of My Heart. There's a few
Oh,
other people that do cooking schools as well. And it is a great place to go, and just to go to the market. When I go personally, I go to the market for lunch every day and eat tamales. To the market, food's wonderful. It's also the place where they really make chocolate. And when I say chocolate, I'm referring, you know, to real Mexican chocolate, not a candy bar, but chocolate. And you have chocolate houses on like every other corner, and that's where you drink hot chocolate. Because
oh,
historically, all of our chocolate was hot chocolate. A candy bar that came from Europe. We're not the land of candy bars, we're the land of hot chocolate. But Oaxaca is known as the place that you go to drink chocolate. And again, the food is excellent. They're also, because they're more indigenous, they eat more of like the insects, like the chapulines and the grillos. They're just, insects are very high in protein. They're very big in the indigenous diet. For example, in my town, because it's quite touristy, it's a very different ambiance. We don't see a lot of that, but if you go to Oaxaca, you definitely will.
and that's where you get the dress, the flowery embroidery around the outfit, right? Isn't that from the
Well,
state
they're
of
called
Oaxaca?
huipiles,
Huipiles.
but
Yeah.
they're all over Mexico. I think they're also,
Okay.
you know, down in Guatemala. Every region has different designs. But again, because it's a more indigenous area of Mexico, you'll find more of the textiles there. Yes.
Okay. So actually Carolyn is posting in some links to articles on JourneyWoman that have spoken to Oaxaca and where to eat. So that's a great link. 12 of the best restaurants in Oaxaca. We've got to we've got to check that out. And I think she also linked Merida, so that's great as well. Now, Michelle is asking about the name of the town that you were in. Did you say it was San Miguel de Allende?
Yes, that's right. I've lived for 34 years. So we're north of Mexico City in the highlands, in the
Right.
mountains.
Okay, great. I'll get to the next question after Kristen. The same question that we asked Kristen about less explored areas. You were just talking about some of the islands off Panama. Maybe you can speak to some of the areas that you've discovered while you've been in Panama, and areas that are must see for visitors that are wanting to go to that area.
Yes, so you know, to get here, you definitely have to fly through Panama City, and I love Panama City for a lot of reasons. Lots to do there. I have a lot of great recommendations for restaurants as well. If you're traveling by car, the country is beautiful. So it has both the Pacific and the Caribbean on both sides of it, obviously, because it's, you know, the connector between North and South America, but it also has a continental divide in the middle. So there's volcanoes. There's a town called Boquete that is absolutely wonderful. It's a little bit cooler climate. It's at a bit of elevation. So they have coffee farms, cacao farms, honey, like aviaries there as well. And it's just a very cute area if you were to drive to the islands. It's a trek from Panama City. Driving to the boat that takes you to the islands is about 12 hours. So that would be more of a road trip stopping along the way. But then Bocas is made up of, it's an archipelago of 9 islands. So the main island, all of the islands have jungle on them. There's restaurants and bars and dancing and other attractions like that on the main island. We have an area called Dolphin Bay that has an indigenous pod of dolphin. So they're not, the species of dolphin doesn't exist anywhere else, and they hang out in this bay on an island called San Cristobal. We've got sailing, we've got jungle hiking, we have, you know, exploring the jungle through ATVs. We have lots of different options of yoga. Some of the most beautiful beaches I've been to are here across several of the different islands. So cacao farms, permaculture farms. It's Bocas is actually a big surf spot as well. So we obviously have rainy season and dry season, but here we talk about surf season and flat season. So those are some of the
Actually,
things.
that was going to be my next question about time of year to go. I'm often asked that about the Caribbean. When's the best time to go? Maybe you can answer that for Panama.
Yeah, February and March, and the beginning of April are really the best as far as lower temperature, not as much rain. We definitely have high rain in July and August, and then September, October is flat, beautiful, but very dry, no wind, so people tend to find it very hot. And also I don't recommend the time between Christmas and New Year's. I would say 90% of the time it's really bad rains during that time.
I
So
didn't know that.
just
Okay.
here, I don't know if I would say all of Caribbean, but that's my experience here.
Mhm.
So September, October, first half of November are quite dry and beautiful if you can handle the heat, but really February, March, beginning of April is that's our busy season. The
Mhm.
Christmas to Easter is our busy season.
That's really interesting. I think that understanding the width and the breadth of the Caribbean region, it's huge. And I think that a lot of people don't really understand how truly wide and deep it is. You know, it's like going from coast to coast when we're looking at a North American country, Canada, to the US. If you're going from Vancouver to Montreal or LA to New York, that's the width of some areas of the Caribbean. So there can be significant distances between the areas, and so consequently the weather is significantly
And I've
different.
asked this a lot. I wanted to mention Panama is below the hurricane belt, so we never get
Right.
hurricane.
Yeah, we used to say the same thing in Grenada and St. Vincent, I have to tell you.
Yeah,
And then
same thing.
Hurricane Beryl made her early visitation this year. Yeah, it is an area that's generally speaking free from those kinds of hurricanes that we're having right now. We've got one tropical storm that's headed through kind of the west part of Cuba and heading up to Florida right now. So hopefully she peters out and doesn't do any damage. Kristen, we got another question for you. And if somebody is thinking about doing a cooking class, which one would you recommend to be worth the time and money or maybe you could speak to an itinerary that would incorporate a really fantastic cooking course. What's worth doing?
Um, you're asking a chef, so I think they're all worth doing.
Yes.
Like for example, at my cooking school, we have 8 different classes. So I always, depends on your interest. One of the fun things is a market tour because Mexican markets are so different.
Mhm.
So we, for example, go to the market for about an hour. Again, when it's my classes, I incorporate a lot of history. So we talk a lot about the history and culture, not just the food. And then we do indigenous cooking, and we buy ingredients from all the local ladies and go home and make a meal. The classes, we have like mole classes are popular, but not everyone's going to go home and make an elaborate dish. So it really depends on the cook and what they're realistically, going to do with it. One of my popular classes is Mexican fusion, because there's people that know they're probably not going to go home and make real traditional dishes because they can be labor intensive. And so they want to make Mexican food, but something that realistically that they will cook.
Mhm. That's great. And how long are the courses?
My most classes in general market tour is about 5 hours. The other classes are about 4. We make a meal and eat it. So we cook for about 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and then we sit down and eat. A lot of my classes go on much longer, depending on the conversation at the dinner table. So it just depends on what we're talking about. In my case, I always tell people, you know, I know a lot about local history, Mexican history, culinary history. So they've got 4 hours to take advantage of it. And
And I
sometimes
hope
those
there's
conversations.
wine.
Hmm?
I said, I hope there's wine that's paired with every food item on the menu.
It depends sometimes. Yeah, we have wine. We have obviously American tourists tend to prefer margaritas,
Okay.
a drink that Mexicans really don't drink. But they're not, they want, you know, some margaritas is something we have, and we do have some wine pairing, but also mezcal, like mezcal pairing too.
Right,
Yeah.
with the little worm.
No, never any worms.
I'm with you on that. Crystal, let's go back to conservation. And what would you recommend? Someone that maybe doesn't have any visibility to, you know, the issues that we've had with coral, and they're coming down. Maybe they're coming down for a week and they're going to be lying on the beach, but they really want to give back. So what can they do? What would you recommend?
Well, I think it would be good to start probably with just my one, first half day snorkel experience. So that way, we have about a 1 hour discussion where we talk about corals and coral reefs and what they're going through and why they're important. It's an interactive discussion. And then we go out and snorkel around the spots where we're doing restoration. So that's a little bit of a taster. And if it's something that somebody says, you know what, that I found that to be fascinating and I want to get deeper into it, then you could kind of go further from there, right? So I have on the other end of the spectrum, I have groups of people that book 12 days with me. I'm sorry, 7 days with me for 12 people where we're getting into the nitty-gritty of everything that we do.
That's great. So, and do you find that they're booking it in advance or they're finding you when they get down there?
With the groups, it has to be in advance, but for individuals, it's usually pretty, I usually have people asking me with a few weeks before they come, but I also have people to kind of stop it. I'm based out of, I partner with a dive center here. So people kind of wander into the dive center and see that it's an option and ask about it. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but we can handle either. But for groups, it has to be ahead of time. There are lots of
Something done in advance. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, so we've gotten a question about less traveled places in the Caribbean and some hidden gems. So I'll pop into that question if you don't mind. So, the Caribbean, and certainly the countries that have joined One Caribbean Canada, they could be any country that touches the Caribbean Sea. So, from Panama to Mexico, from the Bahamas, even Bermuda, all the way down to Trinidad and Tobago, including Colombia and Guyana, etc. I'm often asked for destinations that are, and I don't want to say less popular, but certainly they're unknown. And so where can we go off the beaten track, for example, to countries to explore and to really get to know the culture and the people that are living there and what activities are there to do. So, if I could start in the north and kind of wend my way south, one of the things that I always recommend if people are looking for shorter um, flying times, there are 300 islands in the Bahamas. We tend to think of Nassau or Paradise Island or Grand Bahama Island, but there's so many other islands. As soon as you get away from where the cruise ships go, there's some beautiful islands to explore. The Exumas, for example, or Abaco, Eleuthera, all these islands. Bimini is probably the closest to Miami. And as you continue further south, there are countries that are made up of multiple islands, not unlike like what you mentioned, Krista, in Panama, like say the British Virgin Islands, for example, they're made up of 62 islands. And so you might know the 5 or 6 main ones, but the rest of them are definitely there to explore. Antigua and Barbuda comes to mind. People know Antigua, but very few people know Barbuda. And Barbuda is one of those islands that has stunning white and pink sand beaches. And this was the beach where Princess Diana used to go and bring her boys. And that's where you would find an amazing bird sanctuary. And in particular, you find these birds with a big red throat that kind of pops out. They're quite unique, and that's sanctuary for them there in Barbuda. I mentioned at the beginning that we just added Montserrat, which is just a hop away from Antigua, but it's a lesser known island because they had a volcanic explosion, and it became like Pompeii, or parts of the island became like Pompeii, where parts of it were buried, and there's now tours where you can explore areas that are hidden, including the studio where the Beatles used to record and the Rolling Stones used to go down. So that's something totally different to do. And the other island that I think I just mentioned was Saint Eustatius. And Krista, this is another island that's great for diving. Very close to Sabon, kind of in between St. Kitts and Dutch St. Martin, where they also have a dormant volcano, but it is a great area for diving. And Saba, of course, is another area for diving. I can continue on through the Caribbean, and there's lots of little islands worth exploring. You know, off St. Kitts, there's Nevis, and there's so many islands that don't accept the big cruise ships that go in that can overwhelm an island. And Krista and Kristen, I'll turn this back over to you, but I was going to say that often clients say to me, you know, what happens on a cruise day? And I say, avoid it. Ask ask your hotel what's a big cruise day, and then don't go to the town center or the key areas on those days. If you want to come off your property, if you're in a condo, a villa, a resort, an all-inclusive, wherever you're staying, come off on the days when the ships aren't visiting your particular island. So Kristen, why don't I come over to you and say, what's an area that you would recommend that's a hidden gem that people should visit if they have the opportunity?
You know, like the Caribbean, Mexico's a very big country. So it really depends on the area you want to travel to. I know central Mexico the best, and I think American tourists largely overlook it. They tend to head to the beaches, not realizing the whole center of Mexico is a colonial gem. Most of it was settled in the 1500s. I used to say, you know, it's Europe for half the price. Now it's gotten a little bit more expensive. So it's Europe for 70% of the price.
And Kristen, if I could interrupt, while
Yeah.
you're speaking about that, think
Mhm.
about it from a woman's perspective. What areas of Mexico do you think a journeywoman should visit? And could you also speak to safety? How safe do you feel it would be for them to visit some of these locations?
Well, most of the areas are fine. It's just, I would just say common sense, you know, behave like you're, you know, any big city in America. You don't want to be walking around alone at midnight. Again, so just the common sense precautions, you know your area, know where you are. But you know, in general, I think Mexico is pretty safe. I mean, like I said, but you can't be a wide-eyed tourist not paying attention to your surroundings either. But I'd say the same thing if you were in Chicago. You just got to be, you know, street smart in that respect. As I mentioned, central Mexico is full of a lot of beautiful cities. They're colonial cities. My town and many others like it were known kind of as art communities. And we're kind of, our tourism tends more actually towards women. We have, you know, couples come for shorter stays, but we have a lot of women come, older women specifically in the winter, and they stay for a month or two, a lot of retired people. And a lot of the reasons we have an abundance of art classes. So
Mhm.
it's not just being a tourist, but you're going to go for months to study painting or weaving or jewelry making. But a lot of Mexico actually offers this. So it kind of gives people, it gives them a way to meet other people quite easily, especially if you're a single woman. It's an easy way to meet people. Also, just taking Spanish classes. There's a lot of Spanish schools throughout Mexico, and a lot of these towns in central Mexico have them. And it's a great way, again, especially if you're alone and you can take, just a couple hours a day. It doesn't have to be a full-time enrollment, but it's a great way to meet people.
Mhm.
And, within a day or two, you already have like a set of friends that are there for a month. So I just find that easy, and I meet women all the time that do this. San Miguel is a great place. Guanajuato is a city an hour from us, another beautiful colonial city. Michoacan, like I mentioned, is a state, but the cities of Morelia, Pátzcuaro, they're
Mhm.
beautiful towns. They don't get a lot of American tourism. They get some, but not a lot. But they do offer Spanish schools. They offer art classes, many different things. So all over Mexico, we have places like that.
So you can go learn how to cook, learn how to do art if you're not artistic at all, meet up with a group of women, eat and
Mhm.
drink your way through.
Basically, yes,
I'm signing
basically.
up.
Yeah.
So we've got someone that's asking about if you've never been to San Miguel de Allende, when would you suggest going as a winter escape, and what part of town should they look at staying at from walkability and food perspective?
Well, for this part of time to go at the beginning, it depends on where you live. Obviously, we get in the winter a lot of snowbirds. So if you're coming from Canada, New York, Michigan, you're going to want a winter stay is more common. Then we have people from the South, Texas, Arizona. They come in the summer because we actually have beautiful summers. We
Mhm.
do not get the heat that people think we get because we're very high altitude.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people assume we have hot summers, but we don't. We have beautiful summers. So we're a great escape if you live in Florida in August.
Mhm.
Again, Texas, Arizona, we're a great August escape. My favorite time of the year is summer, and not because of the warmth, but because I get to wear a jacket at night. Because I enjoy it. I enjoy we have a rainy season like they do in the tropics, but these days it's not like it used to be, but it still rains 3 to 4 evenings a week. Rarely rains during the day though. It's just in the evenings. But again, if you're coming from Canada, you're going to want to be there maybe January, February. Our busiest time of the year is the winter for that specific demographic. But another lovely time also is October, November. So it's pretty good. Our hot season is not like in the States. Our hot season actually is April, May. We get different climate patterns. So people, again, they expect a hot summer, and we don't have a hot summer, but if you come at the end of April, that's our hot dry season. So again, it's not what people are expecting.
Right.
As far as the town goes, I mean, the center town, everything is walkable within 20 minutes, let's say, any direction. There's a lot of
Mhm.
neighborhoods that ring the center of town as well that are fine, and you might walk 30 minutes to the main square. San Miguel's grown a lot, especially over COVID. So we have a lot of other more economical neighborhoods, but you would probably take a bus or a taxi to get into town.
That's awesome. So, Krista, we're gonna turn back to you and ask you the same question. So think about places in Panama that would be amazing for a solo woman traveler to go. What's safety like? Why don't we speak to that as well? And just special places that you think are worth a visit.
Well, I did already sort of talk about Boquete, which I think is absolutely worth it if you're wanting to stay on the mainland, but specifically in the islands. I'll echo what Kristen said as well, that it's very, very safe here. We have very little crime in the islands. I would say for the most part, it's crimes of opportunity. And so you were kind of saying, be smart. Don't, if you, I hear about this all the time. People like leave a nice camera in their backpack on the beach and go in the water. And, there's the jungle line right there. And maybe somebody comes out, sees it just sitting there by itself, and the camera's gone. So, but as far as like physical safety, it's very, very safe here. I think there are a lot of women run amazing businesses here as well, which I always like to support and recommend. So there's an island here called Bastimentos where you can go up to a permaculture farm at the top that's women owned, and go on a tour of everything that they grow in this farm and all the ways that things interconnect, and then eat the food from the farm at the end. And then you can also do a plant medicine walk on the same island that's run by two women here, and learn about, these islands have existed with populations for hundreds of years, but the hospital is very, very new. So they've treated, their friends and family using plant medicine for as long as they've been here. So it's really interesting to hear that history, go on the walk, and then you end up down at one of the most beautiful beaches in Panama at the end of that. So these are all things that absolutely you could sign up for solo. The plant walk is actually an Airbnb experience, so you could do it with other people if you wanted to as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's I could go on and on, but that's one that kind of stands out for me.
In the Caribbean, we call that bush medicine,
Mm.
right? Bush medicine, because you go into the bush and you find all your herbs and this and that, and all different medicinal purposes. Really interesting. Okay, so somebody's asking, this is interesting. For a single woman wanting to move to the Caribbean and work digitally, what islands would you recommend? Well, gosh, there's so many islands that actually have fantastic connectivity. You're thinking, okay, for a single woman, where would I go? That is a
I would
really
like
good
to add
question.
something onto that, Nancy, if you don't mind, and that is
Sure.
to look at the visa, because you don't want to go somewhere where the tourist visa is 45 days and you have to be hopping back and forth a lot, I think that's a really important thing to look into before trying to do digital nomad.
And there's a lot of Caribbean islands that offer 3-month or 6-month stays for a digital nomad program. I know Anguilla was offering that, Antigua was offering that. There are countries that have a limit in terms of the duration of time that you can stay on a tourist visa, but you'd have to get that digital nomad kind of approval. Barbados is another one that comes to mind. But I have friends that have moved to Saba, another artist community, and friends that have moved to St. Eustatius, same sort of thing. So I think that it really depends on the digital communications, and certainly feel free to email me. I'm happy to connect you with the right person in the Caribbean to get more information, because it does go island to island, and everybody's programs are just that little bit different. And if I could just speak to safety for a moment, because I'm often asked this question, at consumer shows about safety in the Caribbean, what islands should I avoid, etc. And Krista and Kristen, you both made great points, and that is like, be aware of your surroundings and use your common sense. I always find on the days when there's a big cruise ship in, well, that's when you're gonna have pickpocket issues, and of course be aware of your surroundings. But I often tell people, if they're in the US, that you can go to the US State Department website. In Canada, we go to Global Affairs, and you're able to search by destination to see what level warning they're at. And usually one and two are fine. 3 is when there might be some more issues that are being reported, and level 4 is don't go. These are destinations it's not recommended you travel to. And when I think of the Caribbean, it's really only Haiti and Venezuela that are at that level 4, do not travel, because of the ongoing issues that are impacting those countries. So that's my recommendation, to go to Global Affairs or to the US State, and you can see that these warnings are put in place, of course, to protect you. But I always recommend common sense is the best thing that we can do, right? To be aware of our surroundings, and And you know, don't travel with all your earrings and your jewelry. You know, use the safe in your room and tuck things away. To your point, don't leave the camera on the beach, and be aware. So I know we're coming to the end of our time, but I thought maybe Kristen, you can start first and maybe chat about where's your next trip? Where are you planning to go? Or is there, you know, a next group that you're bringing in? What are you most excited about it within the next year, let's say, and tell us about that. And then oh, you should also tell us how we can get people signed up for your trips.
Okay. As we said at the beginning, I'm not sure if it was on, but I'm currently in a little village on the Spanish-French border called Val Carlos with a group of women walking the Camino, which is one of my newer
Oh,
tours.
cool.
But we're actually right in the middle of it right now. And so it's evening here. And so it's a great experience, I think, for single women that want to go, but they don't want to go alone. And so we walk separately. You do, you know, everything at your own pace. But then in the evenings, you have someone, you know, that's there that we have dinner together and share our stories and the safety in a group in case you need someone. But that's currently here. I have some other tours going on: Guatemala in November, Savannah for holiday home tours in December. And the other one that I really wanted to, I developed specifically with single women in mind, is one in March for a ball in Vienna. And it called on my Cinderella tour because I think there's so many women that would love the experience. And they could even be married, they just don't have a husband that wants to travel, or they, you know, they don't have a partner, but they want to go to a ball. And so I developed that tour, which will take place March 1st through 8th. It's 5 days Vienna, then we go to Budapest for 2 days. And we actually go to a ball. We do the whole 9 yards with getting the dress and the hair and the beautiful dinner. And then I have dance teachers that I hire for the evening as our escorts. So we actually go to a ball with a man who can dance, which for women that likes to dance is actually a really big deal. Because you
That
don't want to
sounds
go to a
amazing.
ball. You don't want to go to a ball and sit in the corner and be a wallflower.
Yeah.
So you got to have someone that you can takes you out and knows how to waltz and rumba and cha-cha and everything. And so that's, again, I did this basically with single women in mind because I just hate the idea that they'd have to, you know, be sitting out or sitting at home. They couldn't participate in something like that. So that's my big tour pitch for single women right now.
So
That I'm
Kristen,
trying to get going.
you're like the fairy godmother.
I try. I try. But I think that I'm a single woman myself, and again, you think about these experiences that you would like to have, but it's just not sometimes so easy, right? And there's no reason we should be sitting at home.
Yeah.
You know, just got to make it possible. And so you can find out about all my tours. My website is called Delicious Expeditions.
Actually, I think we've got Evelyn and Carolyn that are posting in the chat.
Okay.
That's
And then
fantastic.
so you just go to the website and there's a whole list of destinations. And for that one, you would go to Vienna. And
Perfect.
for the Camino, you go to the Camino. And then also there's a few tours in Mexico as well. Like I said, Guatemala is coming up too.
That's great. So Kristen, Krista, same question for you. And we've just posted in here about the Mother of Corals. So that link is up there for everybody to access. So tell us, what do you have in the plans?
Well, I mean, this is just like my own personal travel because all of what I do is really in Panama. But and next June I'm going to the Caymans to go diving. I have a brother who's a quadriplegic, and I'm trained to take him diving as a scuba buddy. And so they have a resort there that caters to adaptive divers, and we do that once a year. So that's what I'm doing in June, and then in September next year I'm going to Malta and the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and then Sicily for a few weeks.
So amazing. It's lovely to know the trips that are planned in the future for 2025 and beyond.
My is full.
Well, that's excellent. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Delicious Expeditions has just been put up there, so that's great.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Carolyn, I think you wanted to come on and talk about the webinar that's going on for the JourneyWoman anniversary at the end of the month. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm here. So thank you, everyone. That was just amazing. I'm just trying to get everyone removed. There we go.
There we are.
So thank you all for joining us today. I just wanted to mention we have a little bit of a busy October for other webinars that we're doing, because as you all know, there's a big event happening in the world in November. So we're putting a little more in October and lightening up on November. But we have a webinar coming up in about 2 weeks on Ireland and Scotland and how to plan your own custom trip. And this is something that I just did recently with Brendan Vacations and did a self-guided train trip. So we're going to talk about that. And then we also have a webinar with Carla Geiser, who's actually on this call, calling in from Africa, from Blue Sky Expeditions. Carla, I don't know if you want to say hi, but we're going to be talking about safaris and wildlife conservation in the middle of October. And then we have our 30th virtual anniversary at the end of October, on October 30th at 2 o'clock. And that's really an opportunity for us to celebrate our JourneyWoman Award winners. And we also have an incredible speaker coming for a few minutes. And her name is, if you've seen this book, The New Tourist, her name is Paige McClanahan. And I just spoke with her this morning, actually. And she's going to talk to us a little bit what's happening around the world with over-tourism and how we can be good travelers. So, and we've got a few other things planned for this 30th anniversary. We'll also have prizes and things like that, but we're doing it in the middle of the day so that hopefully as many people as possible can participate from around the world. And it is a bit of a milestone for us, as you can imagine. And then the rest of the year, we have 2 trips coming up. One is to South Africa with Swan Hellenic in November. And then we have a Northern Lights trip to Norway at the beginning of December, and that'll pretty much wrap up the year. And I am taking December off, so that's what's happening for the next few weeks.
You've got to find a beach in December.
I am. I'm going to Mexico, actually. So yeah. So anyways, it's hard to believe that 2024 is almost upon us, but I'm really happy to have all these incredible women with us. And I see Maggie here too. And Maggie, are you there? Is she still there? Oh, Maggie might have dropped off. She's calling in from Africa. We just featured her in our last newsletter. I'm so grateful for all these inspiring women that are just doing awesome things. So thank you all for being here today. And hopefully we'll see you at our upcoming events and webinars. Thank you, Nancy.
No, a pleasure. Thank you, Kristen. I'm sorry that our third speaker couldn't join us from Cuba. Hopefully, we'll connect with her another time. Right?
Yeah, will do. Will do.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.